Hello, and welcome to my technical audio reel. In this video, I'll be taking you through my full-scope re-implementation of the shooter game sample project by Epic Games using Audiokinetic Wwise. Along the way, I'll talk about my process and how I solve various implementation challenges from pre-production to final mix. This implementation of the shooter game was done from the ground up, starting with silence. Upon downloading the original project file from Epic Games, I familiarized myself with the content base by opening all of the SoundCue assets and setting their volume multipliers to 0. From there, I wrote down each major sound interaction into a spreadsheet and organized them by categories that would reflect my Wwise work unit structure. For my overall production plan, I was inspired by a talk Ben Minto gave at Develop Brighton in 2020, where he described his system for building the foundation of a solid mix.
The way we usually start is with almost like this idea of a holy trinity, and usually ambience, footsteps, play a weapon. And if you can get the balance around this triangle right, how they interact with each other, what the volume difference is between them, how much bass there is in each component, you can pretty much hang the entire rest of the mix off of this.
I adopted Ben's Holy Trinity framework for my project, and each component became the 3 major chapters of my journey. My first step was to focus on the ambience and world emitters of the project. I began by creating Wwise rooms and portals for the initial spawn rooms, the general outdoor area, and also the main cave-like room at the center of the map. For the cave room, there are 2 stairwells with exposed ceilings on either side, and I wanted to make sure that the transition between outdoors and indoors felt appropriate. So, I used Unreal's brush tool to extrude the sides of the Wwise room and create pockets where the outside ambience could bleed through. This, along with placing the Wwise portals, setting a short fade time on the event calls, and adding some state mixing for the outdoor sounds, ensured that the transitions between room tones were completely smooth. Once I had room tones established, the next step was to bring the map to life by implementing all of the various world emitters. Most of the world emitters are simple AK ambient objects with 3D positioning, which we all know and love, so I'll skip those. But there are some interesting things going on with the hologram billboard and the hover cars. For the hologram centerpiece on the map, I wanted to do the size of the prop and VFX justice while still maintaining a sense of space that felt grounded. So I used the Wwise spatial system to allow the audio to bend around walls. Initially, I tried using the collision geometry from the pre-existing walls as the voice obstacles, but I discovered that their geometry was too complex for the diffraction system to handle smoothly. So, I custom modeled walls built from simple primitives and tagged them with AK geometry components to give the diffraction system simpler wall shapes to bend around. This allowed for smooth blocking of the hologram sound whenever you pass behind a wall or go underground. The hover cars were actually left silent in the original project, but for my implementation, at minimum, I wanted the cars that had the closest flyby paths on each balcony to have some dramatic presence in the scene. So, I dug into Wwise's documentation for Niagara to figure out how to give CPU-driven particles sound and a Doppler effect as they whoosh past. For the Doppler effect, I called on my programmer buddy Jarrett for help, and we collaborated over the course of a few weeks in screen share calls to figure out how to implement it. We went over every article and video we could find on how to accomplish Dopplers in Unreal, and with my testing efforts and his vector math knowledge, we were able to get something that worked. The final formula is his blueprint, so I give him the credit for that. But I ended up porting it from blueprints to Niagara and doing the rest of the surrounding implementation to make the RTPC and a location-based culling system work. The results speak for themselves. For the footsteps and Foley in the game, I opened up the player animation blueprint and set about adding event calls to the existing footstep and jump logic. The game's existing material detection system was used to drive a switch group for every possible material you can walk on, which were tile, metal, grass, and glass. For the footsteps, I recorded a pair of boots on different materials around my house, cleaned them in Isotope RX, and isolated the best takes in my preferred DAW, Ableton Live. To achieve a dynamic feel in each pace, I split each footstep into a heel and toe pair and then concatenatively reconstructed them using sequence containers for maximum variation. From there, I used an RTPC connected to the player's velocity to make the space between the heel and toe strikes different depending on how fast you were traveling. This helped convey different weights in the player's footfalls depending on whether they're walking or running. And now for the part you've probably been waiting for, the weapons. There are two energy weapons in the game. One is a standard automatic assault rifle that fires a futuristic bullet or laser projectile that travels instantly. The other is a semi-automatic rocket launcher that resembles a pump-action shotgun and fires a slow-traveling ball of energy. For this part of the implementation, I mostly left blueprints behind and dived into the project's C++ codebase. To begin the shot and projectile implementation, I searched through the weapon-related files and added event calls to each point where a pre-existing SoundCue call was made. For both weapons, I designed each element of their shots in Ableton and then reconstructed the layers inside of a switch group in Wwise. This allowed me to drive the switch group using the same location state system I set up earlier for the ambience and swap out the reverb tails to make the gunshots feel appropriate whether you're outdoors or indoors. For the rifle in particular, I was inspired by how dynamic the guns in Apex Legends are in every shot, so I also implemented an RTPC that counts how much ammo is left in the player's magazine. This parameter is used to drive a number of features, from the volume of an extra mechanical layer that gives the player feedback when the magazine is low, to an extra power down layer that only plays when the magazine is completely empty. For the launcher projectiles, I implemented a looping energy crackle that plays while it travels, and brought back the Doppler formula from the hover cars to make it pitch down as it travels away. For the explosion it causes on impact, I used a blend container connected to the explosion's distance to trigger a different set of samples depending on how far it is from the listener. This means that closer explosions feature every layer in the mix, while further ones use dedicated distant explosion samples. Lastly, to keep the player weapons focused in the mix, I implemented a sidechain RTPC system that attenuates the ambience and Foley buses whenever gunshots or explosions are heard in the weapons bus. And so, that concludes my technical audio reel. Thank you for your time, and before I sign off, I'd like to express my gratitude to a few important people, since this project would have taken far longer to complete without their help. In particular, I'd like to thank my mentor Jeff for all of his advice and perspective, my good friend Jarrett for his help on the Doppler system, all of these other amazing friends who helped me troubleshoot various systems, and the game audio community members who lent an ear for feedback and hints at different points in the project. Thank you.